Julian Miller, I'm co-founder and CEO of LearnMetrix, and this is a picture of me with some of my freshmen from the first year that I taught high school. And right this second, I'm really resisting the urge to make an inappropriate Where's Waldo joke, but instead I'll just say what we're all thinking, which is that I look amazing at thinking. In all seriousness, this is one of my favorite pictures, because it reminds me of a moment that those students changed my life. It happened on my first day, first period, when I walked into my classroom, and I saw their faces looking back at me. As I walk in holding a homework assignment, I'm struck by two realizations. The first is that that day represents the peak of potential for my freshmen. On that day, any of them could end up as valedictorian or going on to the Ivy League. The second realization is that the assignment I'm holding in my hands will end that possibility for some of them. By the time it and the other assignments they get that day are graded, it will be mathematically impossible for some of them to recover that potential. And the reality is even more complex, with students coming in from different levels, different backgrounds, but my job as the teacher was the same for all of them, which was to get them across the finish line. And so I started looking for data or insights that could help me do that. After all, they'd been telling educators exactly what they needed through homework, tests, projects, and more for almost a decade by the time they reached high school. And I thought, if I could learn from a fraction of that data, I would be a more effective educator. Instead, what I learned is what all educators learn, which is that data in education is broken. Let me show you what I mean. This is Mrs. Conway, an algebra teacher. And she wants to help her student Mallory, who isn't doing well on tests. If Mrs. Conway wants to use data to gain insights about what's going on with Mallory, she has to log into no less than 6 different systems. And after she spends 15 minutes managing all of those logins and navigating to the correct screens, she's just overwhelmed with charts, graphs, and visualizations that tell her what she already knows. Mallory's bad at tests. If Mrs. Conway can't help Mallory, though, the school will be footing the bill for her to repeat the year, attend summer school, or if her parents can afford it, maybe they'll buy some expensive tutoring to help her avoid those traumas. But if none of those work, Mallory will be joining the millions of students every year who fail, drop out, or fall through the cracks. And yet, this is how things are done in 90% of our schools. Meanwhile, vital insights about how we could be helping these students are being held hostage by too many systems and too many databases that don't communicate with one another. For instance, when Mrs. Conway actually logs into the system that handles test data for Mallory, all she can see is which questions she got right, which questions she got wrong, and what her overall grade was. But there's a lot more information hiding beneath the surface. And our ability to get to that information and turn it into insights means that LearnMetrix is not only a solution, but an evolutionary leap forward. Our patent-pending technology aggregates all of the data that schools are already collecting. Then it analyzes every dimension to find insights and helps educators to turn those insights into action. So by the time Mrs. Conway logs into LearnMetrix, she's getting information in half the time it took her just to manage all of her other systems. And by the time she clicks on Mallory's profile, our system's already gone to work looking for trends, patterns, and outliers, all of which provide the context to generate an insight that will actually help Mallory. Now, Mrs. Conway can see that if Mallory's assignments were all unweighted, her average would actually be a 90. And she can also see that there's a trend where Mallory is leaving groups of questions blank. And more importantly, on average, she's spending 3 minutes longer than her peers per question. And all of that points to the fact that this is a time management issue and not an algebra or curriculum issue. Now, with a real insight about what's going on with Mallory, Mrs. Conway can actually be helpful. And with a couple additional clicks, she can communicate that insight to Mallory's parents so that they know exactly what to reinforce at home. Now, if Mrs. Conway had to get to this insight by hand, it would take hours, and she might still miss it. Oh, and by the way, Mallory is just one of her students. Mrs. Conway is teaching 5 classes with 30 or more students in each this year, so doing it by hand is not an option. But with schools trading paper for PCs and textbooks for tablets, doing it by hand can be a thing of the past. Data's ability to save time, money, and actually help students be successful has schools all over the world asking, how do we make data a part of our ecosystem? LearnMetrix can be the answer. And to prove it, we're going after the $1.25 billion currently being misspent on the smart classroom market. And with that market growing at about 15.3% annually, we're not the only ones going after it. But our competition focuses on building tools just for administrators or just for educators. At LearnMetrix, we believe that parents and students have to be at the core of any viable situation and that we can win by empowering all of them. Now, selling to schools isn't easy. And as an early stage startup, we've had to be methodical in getting around the barriers that have historically killed innovation on the steps of our schools, which is why we focused on integrating with the top 27 products that serve data and systems for K-12 in the US. We've also employed an enterprise sales strategy, which we've supplemented with a targeted outreach program, which has allowed us to get to know our core customers and understand where the momentum is and what the needs are. And by meeting those needs, we've been able to make money. We currently operate on an annual tiered subscription that costs the school or district between $9 and $25 per student per year. And with some 56 million students in K-12, that's a big opportunity. And our initial traction is extremely encouraging evidence that we're on the right path. We launched our closed beta in August, which we followed up with 1 speaking engagement and 1 article. And we've already seen over 100 unsolicited inbound requests, which we turned into 13 paying customers, a pipeline, and $75,000 in revenue. And today we just added a network that might double that number, so we're pretty happy. But we've done all of this with a team of 3. As a former educator turned technologist, I bring domain expertise and lead the product. Matt Duke, our CTO, cut his teeth at Motorola and UIUC, and he's been programming since the age of 5. And most recently, we're joined by John Thompson by way of Kellogg, and he keeps our operation, running smoothly. This team has enabled us to meet most of our first milestones, but it's also given us the focus to understand that our next set of milestones are even more important, which is why over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll be launching a feeder product to make our sales channels smarter. We'll also be expanding the team by adding 2 full-stack developers and a data scientist, which will enable us to launch open registrations so that any school in the US can sign up with no friction. By hand, I put data together and supported these students. They all graduated from 4-year universities, including NYU, Stanford, and Berkeley. With LearnMetrix, we can put that data behind each and every student in this country and make sure that they all get the best education and reach their potential. If you'd like to help us do that, or you know somebody who would fill one of those positions we're looking for, please come up to us after this or email us at founders@learnmetrix.com. Thank you.